Welcome to 18th Century Cooking. I'm John Townsend, and today we're going back to 1730 to Eliza Smith's cookbook, The Complete Housewife. We're doing one of the recipes that's called carrot puffs. Thanks for joining us today. So here at Townsend's, we've been working on a new project where we're bringing many of these old 18th century cookbooks and some other books back into print so people can read them, because many of these you can find online as a PDF version, but it's so much nicer to scroll through these books in a printed format. So we're printing these with a modern binding and printed though as the original cookbook was. You can find this cookbook on our website. I'll put a link down in the description section. So today's carrot puff episode, let's get started. So this recipe starts off with carrots or parsnips. They need to be scraped and boiled. I've already got some carrots here that have been boiled, and they need to go into some kind of vessel that we can mash them up. We need to turn these into a fine pulp. So we're looking for about a pint of our finished pulp, and this looks about the right amount here. Next up, we need a crumb of a penny loaf. So breadcrumbs in about, a penny loaf is about a 6-ounce loaf of bread. They're little kind of bun things. So I've got some breadcrumbs here. It also says you could use some stale biscuit if you've got that, but we've got some breadcrumbs we're gonna mix into that. There we go. Our breadcrumbs are kind of mixed in there. Next up, we've got eggs. Now, this recipe, it's got a lot of actual measurements, but when it comes to eggs, it just says some eggs, but 4 whites. In other words, eggs and then -4 of the whites. That's very weird. So I've got 6 eggs in here, 6 eggs, which two whole eggs and 4 egg yolks. I've whisked them up and in go the eggs. I love this recipe. We're gonna add some cream. We don't have, it just says a little cream. So there's, I don't know, a tablespoon of cream. It calls for sack wine, which is a kind of a cooking sherry of the 18th century, or a sherry of the 18th century that was used in a lot of cooking. So we've got a little bit of sack. It doesn't call for very much. It does call for nutmeg, which is the only spice that's in this recipe. So I've got some ground nutmeg. Gotta have it, right? It's an 18th century recipe. And it calls for some orange flower water. Now, typically I would just not put orange flower water in a recipe like this because, boy, it's just overwhelming perfume kind of smell. But I just happen to have some orange flower water here in the kitchen, so I'm gonna add a little bit. It also calls to add sugar to taste, but I don't think I don't want to mix the savory and the sweet in this one, and I don't think it's intended to be necessarily sweet. So we're going to not put the sugar in because, you know, carrots have a lot of sweetness that they carry in anyway. So there we go. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe sugar is what this is going to need, but we're going to try it without it and see what this goes. Because I actually haven't tried this one out yet. So we're gonna find out just how this turns out. Let's get this all mixed up. Well, we got our pan ready to go with hot oil. This is actually hot suet is what the recipe calls for. And it's hard to tell whether she wants to deep fat fry these or just pan fry these. I think it's deep frying. So we've actually just got a pan with a lot of suet in it. I haven't gotten a big, pot here. Now, obviously, a caveat as usual, I've got hot oil cooking over an open flame. This is something you gotta be very, very careful with. You probably would do this in a different setting where it isn't quite as dangerous as this is. But this oil is nice and hot. That's what it calls for. Have this oil hot and ready to go. And let's put in our mixture by spoonfuls. So obviously we need to sort of turn these over, making sure they cook to a nice light golden brown. If they're really thick though, they might not cook all the way to the internal inside. So you're gonna have to experiment with exactly how long they need to fry so that they cook all the way through. Well, there are our little carrot puffs. Eliza Smith's very interesting recipe. I'm still not sure whether I've got it figured out completely because this was really an experiment on this one. Let's find out what they taste like. They've got a nice little color here. Like broke this one in half. You can see it's like kind of like a little orange on the inside, darker on the outside. Really, really interesting little flavor to them. You know, I tried the first one out of the batter, a little bit of it, decided that it did need sugar, that this was intended to be a sweet dish, not a savory dish, because they don't really explain themselves in the cookbooks many times. You're not really sure what it's supposed to end up like. So I went ahead and added some more sugar to the batter and fried these guys up. It certainly was a challenge getting them to fry up. Possibly maybe some more breadcrumbs would help them hold together a little bit better. Still very, very interesting. And a fun little flavor. These carrots bring some nice color and they bring their own sweetness along, and you get some of that carrot flavor, and then the rest of it is like a puff. It's meant to be sort of a dessert-like, so very, very interesting. Something I certainly haven't seen before. So a fun experimental dish, and maybe one that I would continue to tweak and see if I could, you know, what it kind of turns into. Not sure exactly what she was intended, but a great recipe nonetheless. And again, this one comes from the Eliza Smith, The Complete Housewife. This is a 1730s cookbook. This is probably one of the very first cookbooks I started doing research in. I had this one for a decade before I started doing cooking episodes. So I've been in this cookbook for a long time, and I enjoy this one for the depth of kinds of recipes it's got. It's also got a lot of medicine in the back of it. So it's a great cookbook. You can find this one on our website. We'll put a link down in the description section. I want to thank you for coming along as we experiment with these things. You just never know what you're going to find. Sometimes a real gem and sometimes a dud, but this one, very, very interesting. I want to thank you for coming along on this experiment while we savor the flavors and the aromas of the 18th century.